Welcome back to our ongoing series of interviews with folks in the power industry. Today, after trying for a while to get a representative from an equipment manufacturer to join us, we have finally found a willing soul. And this isn't just anyone, but Gregg Wong, the technical training supervisor for AEMC, who was also a competitive amateur strongman, which includes competing in the International Strongman Championships. And shocking fact, he was also voted Indiana's most beautiful baby back in 1986.
Yeah.
Aside from these accolades, Gregg spent time as a service manager, application engineer, and technical sales specialist before moving over to AEMC, starting as a sales engineer and progressing to his current role as a technical training supervisor, while also running his own gym that specializes in strength sports. Gregg, my friend, it is a pleasure having you join us. Can you tell our audience a little bit more about yourself?
Well, that's pretty much my entire life story, so everyone knows everything. You know, it's tough to be to peak early in your life, being a beautiful baby. And I did get a scholarship off of that as well too. So
really,
yeah. It was interesting. I could have been a Gerber baby, but my mom decided against it. But yeah, I have the news article and everything to prove it. If anybody doesn't believe me,
I got it.
Just reach out. I'll send it to you.
Or we'll just link it in the show notes and host it on Google Drive.
Yeah, there we go. That's right. I had a different last name then, so you're gonna have to just take it on faith there. I'm not ripping some other kid off or anything. So
fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, right on. Can you tell us a little bit, just a little bit more about your professional history? While your baby accolades are definitely shining by any example. I peaked late in life, so it's one of those things. But what about the professional side of the house?
Yeah, I guess that's probably more important and relevant for this conversation, isn't it? A little interesting. I went to school first, and 4 years of school. Got out of that. Took an office job for like 6 weeks or something, and I was like, this is terrible. I grew up. My grandfather did HVAC work. Worked with his hands. I've always been someone that likes to do problem solving and troubleshooting type work. That's an important topic to me. But anyways, I immediately got back into the field. I got into a field position as quickly as I could. Rose up the ranks through that. Found myself in a lot of sales roles. Mid-career, I suppose. I'm probably mid-career now, but anyways, I'm not that old. And ended up at AEMC through a recruiter similar to you. And
cool.
Yeah, so I've done everything from just general electrical work to monitoring, or rather working with battery monitoring services or systems rather, to battery testing, to insulation testing, did ground resistance testing previously. So lots of different type of kind of testing related subjects in previous jobs, and then ended up at AEMC because it was a good fit, and been going here ever since. Been about 5 years.
Nice. So you've had 5 years at AEMC now, so you're pretty familiar with their product lines and all that other good stuff.
Yeah,
Very cool.
Coming into the manufacturer space was a breath of fresh air for sure, but very different type of work here. I like to tell everybody we hung up our tools and now we just point at things and tell them what to do. We're not allowed to actually touch anything. I still like to get my hands dirty, but other locations, other places.
I understand that.
Yeah.
And that's quite a storied history, man. Thanks for sharing that as always. And as mentioned in the intro, of course, you are our first guest from a well-known manufacturer in the space. Can you tell us a bit more about AEMC and the history of it's Chauvin Arnoux, if I'm not mistaken? Is that correct?
Chauvin Arnoux, yes.
Chauvin.
Yes, so,
I was close.
Yeah. Now, we'll never be able to pronounce it with its true French flair.
Chauvin.
Yeah, exactly. I try to practice. We have some French-speaking individuals in the company, and I think they just shake their head at me. So, no. So AEMC is a subsidiary of a French company called Chauvin Arnoux. But just a little brief kind of background on AEMC. Formed in the 70s, became part of Chauvin Arnoux in the 80s. We're one of two subsidiaries that have a different name, at least as far as I'm aware, in the Chauvin Arnoux family. With AEMC, though, it's more of an Americanized name. It did once stand for Advanced Electrical Measurement Company, or the roll your eyes joke around the office is always eat more cake. But, depending on the day, it can stand for other stuff.
Fair enough.
How it's going. But anyways, so we get a lot of questions about what does AEMC mean. So I thought I'd just help dispel or explain that for your audience. But
I like always eat more cake. It definitely, I'm going to remember it now forever.
Yeah. Easy to remember that one. But, so we've been a part of the Chauvin Arnoux group for a fairly short period of time is comparative to their history. So founded in the late 1800s, responsible for a lot of different innovations in the space, including the first kind of concepts of multimeters.
Really?
Which is really, really neat. Yeah, so we've got an original PO from Madame Curie's husband. So we've been doing this for a minute.
I would say so.
Yeah. So, but one of the original concepts for the multimeter is a Chauvin Arnoux multi-tester. But we've got stuff going back to, the early 1900s as far as what's in our our museum at AEMC in Chauvin Arnoux. So lots of interesting innovation here. Invented the current clamp.
Oh, really?
As well, yeah, the portable current clamp, as well as the clamp on ground resistance test instrument. So we've been doing this for a minute. So it's nice to be part of a company that is, one, still family owned. Still family owned since the 1800s. We're owned by the Arnoux family. So completely private. And two, we manufacture mainly in France, but we also will see two instruments that are completely 100% American manufactured.
Okay, very cool.
So I really like working for a company that focuses on good quality manufacturing in places that in country especially. So the 8510 specifically is one instrument that your individuals watching this your audience may recognize, and our single phase ratiometer, and that's made in the US.
Very, very cool. And it sounds like you definitely enjoy your time there. Can you kind of elaborate on what makes AEMC as a brand so special compared to, say, an SEL or anything like that? What really drew you to the AEMC brand?
Well, one of the things I think that makes us similar to SEL, and I don't have a ton of experience with working with SEL, but what I've always heard about them is, they're passionate about what they do. Mm-hmm. What they do is they do it really, really well. And I know they make a fantastic product, of course, again, just based on feedback, but it's where they seem to shine is customer service and just that overall passion for what they do. And I think that's really what makes AEMC special is, we make great stuff, and it does a pretty good job of selling itself, frankly. But when you have an issue or anything goes on with an instrument, we have a passion to do this and to serve our customers, and we're going to take care of you. It could be something as simple as a basic tech support call. You've got two very passionate individuals on the phone to help you there. They're based in the US, of course. Down to the ordering process, internally to the working with a sales guy, you're going to find a lot of passion about what we do, and it's instilled in us. And what I really like about the company is they don't even have to try to do it. It's just part of working here. So I think that's really what separates us from the pack, is that we're driven by passion. our instruments are not overly complex as far as the features that you'll find in them. So they're well placed for the industry as far as their functionality versus price. So I think that's another special thing about AEMC is we try not to overdo it in many cases and keep things as value focused as possible, but still providing an excellent product.
That is awesome. And that goes to speak to the culture, because you have to develop that culture. It just doesn't happen on its own. It has to be something that kind of thrives. And obviously it starts with a very, very solid product. So that's the entering argument. And then really the culture kind of driving around it. And I've studied that quite a bit, just trying to see what right looks like. And especially from a recruitment perspective,
Sure.
that's what you're looking for, aside from the technical acumen and prowess, it's a requirement, but finding the right culture fit. And it sounds like you've definitely found that. And then the old Navy adage of keep it simple, stupid kind of comes into play there as well, right? Like, you don't want everybody to just be button pushers, but a simple, high quality product it can never be overstated. It's definitely just a great thing. So definitely cool. And then of course I got to see you interact with your clientele base when we were at PowerTest 24, and you could literally see the passion surrounding what you guys and the other members of the team were, and showcasing the new tech and all that other good stuff that's out there. So I can definitely see it from an outsider's perspective, having no real interactions outside of a couple of key events that show it. And then of course your willingness to help and even just hop on a call with me outside of an interview, just to talk to things and give back to the power industry. So to me, that's just reflective of what the company stands for. And you're a prime example. So I appreciate it from that aspect as well. And so speaking of PowerTest, you had the opportunity to showcase probably countless pieces of equipment that AEMC has in its inventory. What are some of your favorite AEMC? I'll get that right before we finish out the day.
Always eat more cake.
There you go. What is your favorite always eat more cake tools on the market today?
Ooh, yeah. Sorry, Christy, our marketing director, that we're saying that so much, because she's going to roll her eyes at me, I'm sure. But
just let me know and I'll block her from being
she's great. Also another source of passion, for the company. But anyways, favorite instruments. So, I personally like a lot of our instruments, and one of the areas that we don't get a lot of love is multimeters. And I get that, we're not necessarily the brand when you think of multimeters, but, consider it, because we make a pretty mean multimeter. And the one that specifically that sticks out is the MTX 3920. Golly, I think I said the wrong part number. That's
it happens. You have to deal with a bunch of different ones.
Yeah, just strike that out there. Jeez.
I got you.
But anyways, our MTX line of multimeters is fantastic as far as the price point and really the quality of it. The functionality of it is a fantastic instrument. So I'm a big fan of those. I'm a big fan of a few of our handheld megohmmeters. I've got two here with me today, but the 6526 here is more of a full featured handheld megohmmeter, 1 kV, 200 gigaohm range. That's probably one of the better features on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our other stuff in this space tends to be like 2.2 gigs, or it's fairly low on a 1 kV, and depending on your usage, that may be completely fine.
Right.
But it's nice to have that range to be able to take a handheld unit out and still get a measurement when needed for like acceptance testing. Another one is this is another handheld megohmmeter, a little different flavor here, different price point. 11 gigaohm ceiling on the 6529, which I just showed you. So those are great instruments that stick out for us. Our power series, our PEL, power energy logger, again, one of those instruments that we've seen a ton of growth with. We're going to see additional releases of new PELs coming in the somewhat near future.
Okay.
So you heard it here first.
I like it.
not a huge special or not a huge focus for your primary audience, but they do use these instruments from time to time. So this is a three-phase logger, three-phase capable logger. It's very simple though in its design. It's not meant for power quality type work, but it's a great quantity logger for like load studies.
Okay.
So what I love about that thing is it's simple to use, installs quickly, well thought out too. It's got 4 big magnets on the back of it, which is just a quality of life thing. Phase powered, all that kind of stuff. So those are, that's a brief overview of a couple instruments. I guess the last one I would add is our power pad, which is our power quality analyzer. And I have to say our ground test instruments too, because that's like a primary area of focus for me. So I kind of like them all really, because they generally have very much of a similar flow as far as their functionality, the same software, all that kind of stuff. We try to stick with the same names for buttons across the line just to simplify things. So, I have a love for all of them. I'm, passionate about what we make and how it works. So,
and that definitely comes through. And that kind of is a great segue into my next kind of question that comes to mind. One of the questions I ask, and this is more dealing towards like relay testing and stuff like that, where a lot of functionality is, and this isn't me quoting, but just a compilation of conversations around AI and making instruments too simple to use. And I know that's a function of you want it to be simple, but you also want to make sure that the core competencies surrounding troubleshooting and things like that are there.
Right.
What's your take on that? Do you think that the macro impacts of testing equipment coming too simple to use, yes or no type thing, or?
To a degree, I think it's more of a big issue from a training perspective. Something I've always paid attention to, or especially since I've been with an instrument manufacturer, is that there is not enough formal training on an electrical program on just instruments and just portable instruments, starting at the multimeter, obviously, but we can stretch that out over a basic set of instruments. So, I do think that there is more of a lack of training than there is an oversimplification of the instruments themselves. Instruments have obviously gotten, I don't know if easier is the right word there, more complex and more data, and especially when we get more resolution, we've got to understand how to utilize or how that data is utilized, right?
Absolutely.
How do we make decisions with that data? Because we're getting down to, like a micro ohm meter measuring in the micro ohms. What does that resolution tell me? So things like just basic metering skills could be improved on in that respect for sure, rather than trying to oversimplify the instruments. So I think it's more of a complexity add to the function of the instruments that does make them simpler to use, more simple, I should say. But also I think there's an education component that's missing there too, or could be missing.
No, absolutely. Now, is there anything from the manufacturer's perspective that like you guys offer like detailed training that would kind of help facilitate that for the companies? And if so, like let's say I am a third-party accredited testing company and I wanted to get the gamut and to make sure that my techs are well trained. How will we approach AEMC? Like, will we reach out to you and say, hey, can we set this up? And is it a online-based module thing? Do we fly you guys out? Is there a cost associated? Like, how does that kind of look from the macro?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. And this gets into how, manufacturers can help their customers and should be helping their customers too. So my charge is the technical training aspect, and that is both product and application as well too. So, if you have a product training type question or desire more product training, we generally offer that for free. And we have a local sales staff, or I should say more of a regional sales staff that can facilitate the majority of that. We have, what I like about our product training too, is we try to come at this from an application perspective as well. So, we're aware of what your general testing needs are. To a degree, we understand things fairly well, I would say, from a sales to application perspective. But we're also there to learn too, so it's helpful when that exchange occurs. But what we do know is how we can apply our instruments to your particular test needs. So we can always help with that from an instrument training perspective, either online or in person, depending on what your needs are. And we'll also demo stuff for you ahead of time just to make sure it's the right instrument for you and accomplishes what you need it to. So outside of that, we do have formal training programs as well too that are more application specific. So the biggest one we're known for, of course, is our Understanding Ground Resistance Testing seminar. This is taught both publicly and privately. We have a few public dates posted right now. We also have a webinar for this one coming up, but we prefer to teach this in your facility or at your
Makes
place.
sense. Yeah.
Working with your group, understanding what your needs are. And it's interesting to see who takes this seminar too, because it's not just the power systems industries that are doing a seminar like this. I do it for lightning protection companies that are testing their grounding systems for acceptance testing, for static type control systems as well too. So there's all sorts of different companies that take these types of seminars outside of the power system industry too. I'll mention we also have an insulation testing seminar. We've just brought Jacob Eldridge on.
I know Jacob. Yeah, good dude.
Yeah. We just brought Jacob on. He's developing an insulation and contact resistance testing seminar. We have one already, but I believe it needs a lot more.
Gotcha.
Application as well. And then I have a power quality seminar, a power quality measurement seminar too. So we offer both sides of the training spectrum here, and we can do custom stuff as well, custom training for you. So just let us know what your needs are.
Very cool. Now, do you guys maintain like an LMS platform or webinar platform?
Yep.
So for ready reference? And if so, what's the easiest way to find something like that?
Yeah, so right now we've got some YouTube videos. I recently remade some videos on ground resistance testing methods.
Okay. Gotcha.
Everything from soil to fall potential, 2 versions of fall potential. And then one that may be interesting for your audience is the slope test method, which is an alternative to fall potential found in IEEE standards, but can be used on very large ground mats or ground systems. Kind of a misunderstood method overall, and so we made a video detailing how you can use one of our resources to complete this test when spacing is an issue for ground resistance testing.
Now, is it like an AEMC? See, I got it right that time. YouTube channel? Is that the easiest way to look it up? Is just go and type in AEMC into the Google or to the YouTube search bar? Perfect.
AEMC Instruments will bring it right up. You can find it on our website as well too.
Gotcha. I'm definitely gonna have to do a little bit of digging. Like I said, the more you know in this industry, right? And
sure.
I mean,
yeah.
Even from a goofy old recruiter's perspective, we still like to know what's going on at least a little bit, or some of us do.
Yeah. Well, and you can catch stuff about our instruments. We've got some pretty good resources on there. If you're doing some type of training on just instrumentation or measurements, you can find like what is RMS. We have a video on what is RMS, what is hysteresis and measurements. So those may benefit individuals not necessarily looking for instrument specific stuff, but just a training overview as well. And I should also add that we are currently working on developing a somewhat regular focus group type event that'll be recorded and then available for rewatch. And those are going to be focused on very specific topics, very specific applications or processes, like making reports, for instance.
No, that's very, very cool. And you mentioned working groups, which I actually find to be a really, really salient thing to getting customer feedback. Do you guys have a pretty standardized, or do you send out surveys to kind of, how are you pulsing your customer base to make sure you're implementing what is important to them?
Sure. So, this is fairly organic for us, especially from your audience. We hear your audience, and honestly, I appreciate this, frankly, because it's great to hear when stuff works.
Yes.
But frankly, one thing I'm interested in hearing is when it doesn't. When something is maybe just slightly annoying or just an absolute problem. Getting that feedback is very important for us. And I'll kind of give you a brief overview of what we do with that data. So you call in and have a comment about something's not working for you or whatever it is, right? It could even be a suggestion, frankly. And we put that into somewhat of a database. And then we're looking at those per number of units sold, right? So we can then kind of quantify what is very important versus what is maybe something that needs to be adjusted later on down the product's life cycle. So, and this could be software or hardware driven, and that's not a special process, but I just want to point out that we do listen. We do take a lot away from customer feedback. So it's a fairly organic process. But again, anybody watching, I would encourage you, if you do have some type of comment for us on our products, good, bad, or otherwise, please reach out to me or to our tech support team to provide that, because we want to hear it, frankly. I've learned a lot from these customer feedbacks. Specifically, this industry pointed out that there's a bit of an issue with our 6240 leads and the case of the instrument. And that is something that is being reviewed right now by engineering, and a solution is going to be eventually created, or at least an adjustment to future products will be made.
And having the ability to kind of iterate on that, and having the feedback loop, to me, is one of those imperatives, the imperatives that must be in place in order to kind of stay at the forefront and the cutting edge. And it's a little not off topic because it's technically multimeters, but I just did a talk with Tom Wire, and to me, like you mentioned, magnets, having those in the back to where they're up against a case. He was covering some of the things that you need to purchase outside of the meter that to me wouldn't be a very large cost add to just include that, thus making what you're selling a better product, like a strap to hang on a cable or something like that. Like that's not a big spend. You can buy them in bulk, package them with your stuff, and now you've just added one more convenience feature that wasn't there previously. So that's why I think that having the customer feedback from that perspective is definitely so important. But it sounds like you guys have that. What are some of the channels? Are primarily, do you get feedback, or do you have somebody scouring like review sites and kind of looking there? Or are you based on, is it mainly what they submit over to you guys?
Yeah, it's somewhat reactionary, although I will say that something I developed not only in sales, but from a training perspective, especially, is to ask that question. Yes. What's going wrong with you? For us, I can't solve your personal issues, unfortunately. I'm happy to listen.
So no marriage advice, no marriage advice or anything like that on these sales calls.
Maybe if we get to know each other, I can help with that a little bit.
Fair enough. I'll hit you up later. No, I'm just kidding. I'm happy. Sorry if my wife sees this. She's the best. As someone who has been through marriage counseling, maybe I can save you some money. So maybe I can be that resource. Which was very helpful, by the way. No regrets ever at all about that process. I'm with it.
Whole nother conversation.
So
it's a fairly organic process of getting that kind of feedback. You can reach out to us if you have that kind of feedback, but we look at test guy on the internet. I've seen some stuff there. I've reached out to people in the past on comments. I think we could probably, I know we have considered doing like survey type work in the past. I think that's an area that we could grow though. One thing I should mention about the company is we have grown immensely over the last couple years, and anybody, and I know a lot of people watching this have probably experienced something similar. When that happens, you're just holding on to the reins sometime and taking it one day at a time. And so there's a lot that we want to do, that we'd like to spend time on, but, we have to prioritize a lot of how we're growing, and try to best implement what resources we do have towards that. So, when you grow that fast, it's hard to grow your people that fast too, of course.
Yes. I'm living that dream, my friend. Like it's like I call every day when I hop on calls and everybody's asking how everything's going. I'm like, it's like drinking water through a fire hose. You're just doing what you can to stay afloat while still managing the expectations of customers, or in my instance, candidates and clients, and making sure there's feedback being given and all that.
Yep.
And while still trying to focus on the accounting and the legal and everything else that comes with running your own dang show. So I empathize, and you got a big sigh out of me for that one, for that reason. Like, no matter how, there's always going to be growing pains depending on what level you're at, you know, so couldn't agree more. But that just to me is one of those critical aspects. And I always find the most value in the criticism, right? So if you got a bunch of yes people going out there and backing up what you're doing, saying you have the greatest products out there, then you're probably catering to the wrong audience. And you know, I mean, you're going to run across the quote unquote trolls out there, but there's so much value in looking, and then like you said, trend analysis and keeping track of all that stuff and making sure, and then taking the appropriate steps to get it implemented, which is huge as well. So it sounds like you guys are also drinking from a fire hose, but doing your damnedest to make sure that you're taking on board customer feedback and recommended improvements, etc. So kudos, man. That's awesome.
You know, our priority is our end users and our distributors who support our end users. And we want to focus on as much business as we can. We want to capture as much as we can. We want, we want to sell as much as we can, because, but at the same point in time, what I would say about that is, what I think is important about our company is that we're not oversellers. You know, we're priced fairly, I think, as far as where we fit in. We're definitely not the cheapest, but that's for a reason. So, you know, we while we have had that growth, and we do have to kind of pick our spots, as my fearless leader Tim says, we still do it with a sense of not necessarily urgency, but proficiency is how I would describe it. It's like, we want to make sure you still get the product that you need and want. And I think a great example of this especially is, like, we're also not going to give you a lead time that's not inaccurate. And I gotta give kudos to our customer service team, and Valerie and Ashley. They're responsible for determining that stuff. I heard such good feedback from our customers during that really big time of growth after COVID, that, hey, you know, it was 12 weeks, but you actually told me it was 12 weeks. Right. You know, and it sucks that it took 12 weeks, and we've improved dramatically on that too. But the fact that we were able to sit there and tell people that, versus what could have and did happen in other places, in other industries, as we've heard, just terrible. You know, they'd be like, oh, it'll be there in 4 weeks, and then it's not there for 18 weeks or something like that, or they just quit responding to you. So the growth's crazy, but it's also been done very well, frankly. So. And
another example, and kind of looking at that, look at how many projects were put on halt just due to the GSU lead times and stuff like that to make that happen. Like, and managing customer and client expectations just in general is so massive, and keeping it right, because I mean, you'll burn a customer base quicker than anything if you start you know, going in erroneously, and more importantly giving the updates, as we mentioned, and that is so paramount, or at least it is in my humble opinion, to do business the right way. You know, there are people out there that aren't really concerned about that, and they go on a volume metric, you know, and trying to make all the sales, but you'll eventually burn the bridges, in my opinion. And so making sure you have those feedback loops and managing realistic expectations. 12 weeks, a long ass time to try to wait for on equipment, but at least you know it's coming. You know what I mean? So huge, man. Definitely do. Definitely good feedback as well. And like I or at least I've seen in the industry, it seems like we have more players that more good players than not. That do kind of, you know, put customer first. And to me, like I said, I'm one man's opinion, but it seems like the right way to do business. So you get kudos from me for it.
It's you know, being able to tell people when we were wrong, because everyone's made mistakes before. I will say that it is very rare that an error comes up, but I will say that the entire team here, and I think it stems from a passion to do what we do and do it well, but they'll own up to that stuff. We've reached out and told some customers, like, hey, you know, We messed this up. There's a problem. Yeah. And here's how we can fix it and move on from it. So, it's good to be empowered by our leadership to have that kind of personal touch. And I think that's, that's unique. It's unique, and there needs to be more of it for sure. So, but yeah, it's been a challenge, but a very good challenge.
Absolutely.
It's been a heck of an opportunity the last couple of years.
Well, and it's one of those things too, like and this comes down to the management of delivery and everything like that. Like, you go through stages of growth cycles, right? And it's so hard to even turn down perhaps some new customers at the time, because some of those customers you may just not get back. But a lot of people discount the management and the leadership to kind of pull somebody and kind of pull back the reins a little bit to slow it down just enough to meet demand and expectations, but still maintain growth trajectories and all that. But it sounds like you guys put an emphasis on that, and again, I agree with it. So great stuff. And then we kind of touched base on the AI aspect of things earlier. And I love this question. Pretty much the general consensus has been nobody wants it in the test equipment. But obviously with a manufacturer, I'm going to ask, do you see it from a data pooling prioritization, or do you see it actually making its way in to where there's some functionality with a built-in guide or anything happening from the manufacturer side on that? And if so, what do you see kind of as the pros and cons of that?
Yeah, I mean, from a zoomed out perspective, there is a form or function of AI that is coming to everything. It's already in areas in which technology can rapidly develop, and those are the obvious ones. Vehicles obviously are one, but just raw computing and the functionality there, especially, is where the software aspect is where we're going to see the most growth, obviously. But from a more zoomed in test equipment world, there's kind of just a bigger statement there is, when we do talk to customers, when we consider new features for our instruments, we find that there's a somewhat slow acceptance across the board for other various technologies to be implemented. So with that being said, AI will end up here one day in these test sets. Frankly, it's probably going to reduce the reliance on them to a degree, because we'll see more preventative monitoring installed, condition monitoring installed, and that may reduce the need for some testing in the probably very, very distant future at this point. But there will always be a need for the physical instruments to be taken out there. And, with especially with some security risk in critical infrastructure, the connectivity of it is going to be very limited. One
would hope anyway, right?
Yeah, one would hope.
We got bigger issues,
one would hope. So, I don't think that you're going to see AI, quote unquote, infect instruments in any time soon at all. However, on the flip side, getting back to the software aspects of things, what data is collected, whether it's from a test instrument or some type of monitoring system, online monitoring system, that data being processed by AI is probably already happening or greatly being considered. And that's a fantastic use of it.
I would say that's the ideal use case in that particular, where you don't have a human on site, perhaps at a substation or something like that. Real-time data collection and aggregation and sorting and things like that that'll trigger something that's far beyond just like an HMI or SCADA capability, So I could see that being very valid from that aspect of it.
As AI can do more complex calculations and collect more data points over time, we're going to see it be able to complete more complex tasks, more complex decision making. And that, that's important too. That does sound scary, and it does sound like, people could potentially lose their jobs. And that is a real possibility, of course.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
we see that in automation, or have seen that in automation. But what's more important there to highlight is that those changes drive salaries up in many cases, because we need more complex
supply and
individuals to solve.
demand. Yep.
Exactly. But anyways, we're going to see it solve problems of making decisions very fast. And that's what's important overall. And it doesn't matter if it applies to the testing industry, in looking at, maybe our flash calculations being done, maybe almost in real time. And things of that nature could be around the corner sometime. Online insulation monitoring is kind of an interesting that it's somewhat of an insulation monitoring type technology is being implemented in more stuff, and that's a great idea, frankly. But to be able to make decisions on what we do with that outside of just the basic relaying functions, I think that's really the strong suit that AI is going to play overall.
And without divulging any of the AEMC secrets over there, so no efforts right now to like have robot AI cyborgs to go out and do. Okay, just
no, yeah, maybe drone delivery.
There you go. I like
That's what you get the AEMC drone to drop a TTR at your site.
That would be dope. That would definitely be helpful, probably.
Yeah. New product coming very soon. Our 8511 DTR. So we'll. Drone delivery service optional.
I like it. I freaking like it.
Yeah.
Now, so we've already kind of talked about the simplification and then the importance of basically troubleshooting fundamentals when it comes down to it. And I know you have a penchant for root cause analysis and then just and troubleshooting. Can you kind of give us your take on that? I'm very familiar. The Navy is huge on root cause analysis, and especially it's usually in hindsight, after something good or not good has happened, and then we go in and really peel back the layers. But give us your take on it, Greg.
Yeah, so let me give you kind of a quick history, and then I'm gonna ask you a question here. So, it's strange to say that a hobby or an interest is problem solving.
Right.
Let me tell you that. That's a weird thing to say, but I've found one way to get better at anything or something specific is to kind of fall in love with it. Right. So, for me, like mathematics is a struggle, frankly, but I find it fascinating. And it's somewhat true with this problem solving and troubleshooting analysis stuff. And obviously root cause analysis being one piece of an overall troubleshooting function. So, I've fallen in love with the idea of troubleshooting because I think I was kind of bad at it, or I knew I was kind of bad at it, right? And so, but looking at the problem from a perspective of a scientist is really, I think, what really comes down to being a good troubleshooter or a good problem solver. So, when you have a problem, whether it's technical or not, what do you think the most important question to ask is? I'm always interested to hear what people say on this question.
So for me, I'm kind of like you are and kind of adopt that methodology or did many moons ago, but really it comes down to trying to find the actual why and the root cause. So you're going to have an indication down line in traditional troubleshooting theory and methodology, like let's say using a wine line diagram. I'm going to continue to chip away and work my way back to whatever it may be. I can give an example without getting, ship specific, but like we had launched a RIB, a rigid hull inflatable boat, and one had died underway, right? So a crew was stranded, and then we launched a second one, and that one started taking on water. So that required a very thorough investigation to kind of figure out the why. And you could have simply said, well, there was a hole that required patching in the inflatable part. Okay, well, to me, why didn't we catch that, right? So that's step one. And then so it's not just that, it's not looking to point a finger or blame at somebody. You may have a more systemic cultural issue at that point. So to me now I'm digging back even further, and I'm trying to figure out. So when I'm saying root cause analysis, I'm trying to get back to what is the underlying cause that caused this, we call it an error chain in the chain of events. So, because I mean, it can be triggered by one, but it may highlight some of the the various detriments that came about, if that makes sense. So to me, that's how I look at it. So it's the ultimate search for the original why, I guess.
Right. Yeah. And then I think that shows that you have a higher than most ability for good troubleshooting skills, or you have those good troubleshooting skills.
I'll take
in my probably somewhat uneducated opinion on the matter. But again, I think the most important question that we oftentimes miss is, what don't we know about a problem? What don't we know about the issue that could be occurring? How zoomed out do we need to be to really see the potential issues here? So the first question I always ask with a troubleshooting scenario is, I have all these variables. What are the other variables that could be playing in here? What don't I know? People could be a big part of that as well too. We think of systems as being fairly closed loops, and generally they are, but they exist in a medium somewhere. There's a television in here, and everything inside that TV right now is part of a system, but that TV is connected to a much broader system. And then, oh, by the way, it's mounted to something that could be connected to, something that's metallic in nature and be part of another network. So, that's the kind of zooming out that I think a good troubleshooter has, and the ability to ask, what don't I know? And what skill sets do I not have potentially to solve issues as well too. So, we pride ourselves maybe too much, and it sometimes can be blinding in thinking that we know every single thing about every single problem. So and again, that could be applied to not only to troubleshooting technical issues, to other more broad-based problems. But something you said I think is really important, and it's important for even the apprentice level to have a good grasp on, and that is that the oftentimes the ultimate cause of things is people. Right? We're the ones that are putting this stuff together. We're the ones designing it. We're the ones designing the components that are being used for the design. And people are not perfect by any stretch of the imagination.
As the quote goes, to err is human, right? Like, that's literally why that statement is so applicable, because it's true.
But what's more important to take away from that is that organizations and rules, standards, specs, codes are all put together by people. Our industries are made up of people, and they make errors from time to time. Now, we have a lot of error checking obviously involved in these different systems, but problems are oftentimes more culturally caused from a professional cultural perspective, and changing that culture can be incredibly hard. And I think what's important for everyone to have some buy-in on this, especially, is from a point of safety. There could be, and I'm sure everyone can speak to some safety procedure or really non-safety procedure that was not considered from a safety lens. So we need to all feel kind of empowered to be able to make changes like that.
Well, and I want to highlight something too that'll kind of close the loop on the RIB investigation thing without getting into the FOIA request and all that other good stuff.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But the ultimate conclusion that we came down to was there was a systemic cultural issue that didn't put a focus on attention to detail and compliance. Right. And it wasn't the fact of the text. You could easily have just pointed the finger at tech X, Y, and Z and said, you're at fault, right? But that would have, and that would have been probably an acceptable answer for some. But to actually truly go back and then, and then looking at a department kind of, and like I said, I'm trying to keep this very macro level so I don't get in trouble. But it's one of those things, like, you step back and then you start pinging leadership, and then you start looking at their training methodologies and how much attention are they paying. And then it does come down to actual, and we have what's called departments, just like you have in a major corporation. But it came down to department standards. And so that was what ultimately was the stopping point for us. Like, we were able to, because I was the investigating officer, and I looked and I tried to see, okay, is it all the way to the macro of big Navy? Is it systemic Navy wide? Like, what could have caused this? And ultimately, like, where I was able to conclude the investigation was, it wasn't divisional or the individuals that were doing the checks. We expanded that out to the departmental level, and it wasn't replicable across the other departments. So that was the common denominator was like, okay, I can stop looking here. And then we placed, some preventative measures in place and gave some additional attention in some corporal punishment that comes along with some of that stuff. That's a byproduct of working in an industry where life and death is pretty much a common there.
Sure.
And so, but ultimately that's what it took. And it wasn't that anybody was intentionally negligent. It's just if you don't uphold the standards and push that, to your point, the curiosity behind things, trying to go a little bit deeper, looking at the what I don't know. There were no secondary checks, and like I said, it ended up ultimately hurting mission sets there.
Right.
So to me,
it's
that
downtime.
just kind of echoes your point. Correct.
Right. Yeah. It's downtime. Downtime is probably the second worst. It's downline, obviously, from safety concerns. But downtime is costly and can be problematic very much down the chain. In your instance, it delayed a mission, and in other instances, it'll delay the release of something or cost a lot of money or something like that. So,
absolutely.
We want to be considerate of all the other effects that these issues can have. And I think what's important to take away from your scenario, and your scenario is generic enough to apply, to anything, right? Is who dealt with this problem the most, and were they equipped from a role perspective to be able to
very, very valid point,
potentially prevent this from occurring. You can't, obviously, it's not a personal issue. It's a role issue, not maybe a personality issue, of course. But these also are organizational driven too. And I think you've probably seen a lot of organizations miss the mark on either profit or from a safety perspective, maybe where something bad happened and they weren't able to look down line. But there's a story that comes to mind, and I'll keep it brief. Kodak had the technology for Instagram. They had the platform for Instagram.
I knew that. Yep.
And the ignorance there from a leadership perspective prevented them from seeing that from occurring. They had their software engineers and their development people departments came together and said, this technology has value. And the Kodak leadership said no. So there's also a leadership component here as well. And obviously they missed the boat big time. But they had it 10 years in advance. Too, which is nuts. So, you look at, equipping your downline for being ready to give you the feedback to make change in an environment where that kind of exchange is welcomed, not only just protected, but welcomed as well too. So, that's a highly important part to problem solving. That's a little beyond the troubleshooting aspects of thing, and more in the macro, as you called it, problem solving world, for sure.
Could agree. And I mean, you see countless examples. Look, Blockbuster knew that Netflix was on the horizon to making it happen, and they ultimately ended up out of business. And a lot of it goes down to not having a valid feedback loop or communications up and down the chain of command. And that's often one of those things that we point out to. And I see a lot of translatable scenarios where stuff that we did in the military, which has been around since late 1800s, so they've had a really long time to try to figure this stuff out.
Right.
But even down to like operational risk management, I just had a conversation with Tom Sandry around that, and like we try to pull those best practices, and you wouldn't necessarily see it because the military is very much a give an order, make sure it gets executed, especially during the heat of battle. That's a very important thing to have. But whenever you're not in those scenarios, the feedback and open feedback and honest and being able to accept criticism, especially at the leadership level. If you have yes men, then you're going to miss opportunities, or at worst, in a Blockbuster or a Kodak scenario, you're out of business. When they could have been easily And it's easy to armchair quarterback that stuff, right? But
no, of course.
But
Of course.
like, but you know, in doing a root cause analysis, that would be one of those things that I would look at and would say, okay, you had some cultural concerns there because you didn't have the feedback loop, or you didn't give objectivity and credence to whatever was being passed up the chain of command. So perhaps there was some arrogance at the leadership level. I don't know these people, I can't speak to it, but that would be something that I would be inclined to think, you know?
So I'll give you another story, and this one comes from a speaker I recently heard. So this is not like a very original thought for me, but it does apply. It does apply. Again, a short one. The company Frito-Lay was in trouble at one point, like in the 90s. Like snack food was the non-fat craze at that point. Snack food was not really known for being healthy at that point. So the CEO sent like a VHS tape to every Frito-Lay manufacturing facility, and it got played for all the employees. And he basically said, like, I need help. I need your help. So this gentleman in California created the recipe for hot Cheetos. And he brought it. He called the CEO's office and said, "I have a snack food for you."
Wasn't he a janitor or something?
He was a janitor.
Okay, he was. I've heard that story. Yeah.
He was a janitor, and so you see it. That's a good example of working from not only from a leadership down, but also having the bravery to bring that up as someone as lowly as a janitor, and then the humility for the company to say, like, hey, this guy is a janitor, yes, but he is also a contributing member, and he is seeing something that we don't see, that we don't know. So asking that again is back to that base question: is what don't I know about this situation? 100%. I think a fun version of that too, that I enjoy asking people when I want to get to know them like really well, is like, what's something that you know now that you didn't know, or that you thought you knew differently in the past, right? And looking at that, I'll give you an example of that too, with something that's very close to what I do with AEMC is the follow potential method. It tends to be taught backwards, and understanding how it works will give you some flexibility in the testing procedure. What we're taught is, take this one measurement, and that doesn't work. It's not a full good look at the measurement quality overall, and being able to verify the measurement. So there's something that I thought I understood, and then I learned that I was wrong on. And obviously that's what I instruct on the most is ground resistance testing. So, but it's interesting to ask that question of yourself and of other people that are near to you, because you can learn a lot there. You can learn a lot really fast. And
tell me if this aligns with, or so as, and my parents used to say it all the time, like the kids always think they know everything. And, and looking back and having the time to reflect, I felt like I knew everything when I was a teenager into my 20s. And now it's just like, I feel dumber every day because like, it's more of a curiosity. Like if you have a drive towards curiosity, then you open up your purview to so much more, and then realize, so for me, like if you were to ask me that specific question, it's like, I thought I knew everything and I feel stupider every day today based on it, but I'm doing my damnedest to try to be not so stupid.
Right. Yeah. I just want to know more about kind of everything sometimes. Yes. And that's a hard thing to be too, but it's tough because there's so much that you want to try to master and learn, or just get a basic grasp of. And there's not enough time in the day. And unfortunately for every little thing, so you've got to focus a little bit on what's important to you. But it's tough, but the flip side is worse. The flip side is much worse, and I think we do see that as an issue with maybe the broader society overall. But to be good in any technical role, but especially this one, you've got to have a passion for it.
Absolutely.
And to learn it, and to admit that you don't know everything, and to also exchange that information with others who will want to learn it. So,
right. And I know you and I talked about this from a surface level, and not to get political, but like when the bridge hit the Francis Scott Key, or when the ship hit the Francis Scott Key Bridge, you can go on any social media platform and everybody's espousing their opinions as if they're marine engineers or navigators or someone who understands how tugs work and everything like that. I did 23 years in the Navy, and I wasn't going to touch that because there's too many variables that go in. Right. And, everybody's an epidemiologist when it comes to, vaccines, or, with the Boeing issues, everybody's now a quality assurance inspector or assessor. Like, all you're doing is basically giving your proverbial opinions on things without doing any due diligence or research. And it seems like it's just become so systemic in society. And to me, like, and like I said, this is definitely a segue off, but like, if we would all take the time to have a curiosity, and instead of, immediately responding and letting emotions overtake the situation, we would all be served so much better, in my humble opinion, just through a curiosity framework or perspective. And that's one of the benefits for me of doing these interviews. There's mutual, there's tons of benefits from it, but like, I'm just genuinely curious to know more, like recruiting aspects of thing. I could go out and recruit, right? And look at a job description. But like, to me, that doesn't really give me a holistic view as to what a day in the life of a testing tech is, or, and to have Tom Wire or you tell me about manufacturers or multimeters, like it just, it helps just grow that knowledge. And and by proxy, I hope the audience gets that as well, for what it's worth, that's my 2 cents on society problems and everything else.
No, for sure. It's having, and it's tough because I think we sometimes we look at the youth, I guess, for lack of a better term, and they say, they're not motivated to do X, Y, Z, which, a fun fact kind of related to that is, trade schools are, like, by and large having like a wait list right now. It's kind of neat. Like there's been a huge, fantastic, right? Kind of a response to a problem that maybe never should have happened. But we've got to find ways to inspire the youths, the younger generations, and we've got to learn to communicate with them too. Absolutely. And I mean, I'm not, I'm 38 years old, so I'm somewhere in between there, I think. But I hate to hear that of, well, they're just not motivated to do X, Y, Z. Like, they just need to pull themselves up and figure it out. No, you got to learn how to talk to them. Like, we were all very young and very kind of terrified at one time of the world. And if you can learn to connect with people that are a different generation from you, or that have different motivations than you, and find ways to inspire that curiosity, you're only doing the world a favor, frankly. So it starts obviously very young, of course, but it continues on into individuals' professions. Someone gets some kid comes out of high school and gets a job, as an apprentice. That's starting a new life, and we've got to be more accommodating to making sure that we communicate with them and inspire them on the way that they understand. Anyways, that's kind of my rant. And I totally agree. And ultimately, if you try to, like, you can't necessarily package it in a nutshell, but like having respect for generational respect, across the spectrum, and then the humility to realize that we don't know everything, and then we can find some more commonality. And to your point about, the skilled trades, and a lot of it's kind of a macro pendulum swing, and and a lot of that is societal impacts and things like that. But just to have those conversations, and it's one of those things, and try to bridge that gap, and then pass along the wisdom and knowledge. And I know you're happy to hop on calls, as is like Tom and Drew Welton and all those guys. They're all sharing their knowledge, and they're trying to meet the younger technicians per se, but where they are, to pass on that wisdom. Because if you're not doing it, and you're constantly abrasive against one another for whatever the reason may be, you're not going to make any headway as things go. And then then you just kind of see a de-evolution of things, in my humble opinion. That's a very extreme example, but so at least or it seems to be there seems to be
a big push towards that, or at least I'm seeing it in my little world, and perhaps it's because of the silos that we live in and getting the opportunity to talk to guys like you. But it's always good to see people that are looking to give back and help others grow and be trained and mentored. So, rant done.
I think that's enough ranting on that. But I'll give you. So I'm in a leadership training program right now, which AEMC graciously puts us.
That's awesome.
Invests in us for programs like that. And recently, this week actually, our session was over how to help solve pain points and how to understand the people that are under your leadership a little bit better. And this question really stuck with me, or a question you can ask to help smooth over, help process pain points, was tell me more. And that's really telling. That's an important question that we probably don't put in our toolbox, our mental toolboxes enough. Is it could be used for something as basic as troubleshooting. It could be more complex. This could be that marital advice, frankly. And that's something that I will absolutely start utilizing more, because we hear things. I hear people say stuff, but do I actually listen to it? And so by
active listening,
by keying in on, by asking those questions like tell me more, it's disarming. In a personal situation, it can be disarming. But two, it also expressed a passion and an interest in what it is that they are talking about. So it could be your kids, it could be your boss who's maybe asking you to do something and you don't understand it and you want to ask for better clarification. If you are a boss, if you're a people leader, you need to have the humility to say, maybe I didn't explain that as well as I could have, or I need to learn how to explain it to this individual in a way that in a manner they're going to understand best. So I really like that question. I'm a big fan of it. I've written it down. So a fantastic idea to add to your repertoire, to your mental toolbox.
Absolutely. No, that's great, man. And we'll get us kind of back on track here a little bit. Sorry. Now that we've had no, I enjoyed it. And like I said, this is just two guys having a conversation. So these are specifically formatted the way they are, so we can kind of touch on some of the pain points, because it may benefit someone out there. You know what I mean? So and that's ultimately what it's all about, right?
I find the whole process of system engineering fascinating. It's very an entire study of just engineering systems and finding breakdown and improving efficiency and leveraging more lean models in that respect too, but also being aware of what you don't know and finding ways to be more
and like you pointed out, the applicability is universal if you think about it. It really just serves through a variety of different scenarios, not even just from a root cause analysis of troubleshooting, but like a life cause analysis and troubleshooting almost. So I'm with you, and like I said, it is just trying to keep that purview open, because I think human nature gets in the way. Imposter syndrome can come to the forefront,
big time,
and then that's going to make you more defensive and things like that. And I'm actually reading, I've read it a couple times now, but doing it with my rucks, I go out and walk, and just trying to keep my big butt in shape at least a little bit. So go out and ruck 4 miles, and I'm listening to Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Lee Babin, and it really does come down and kind of highlight some of those, like, you have to kind of gear down there, big boy, and kind of take it into action and breaking it down. So couldn't be more on point, and definitely good stuff. Now, one of the topics that you seem to have a passion for, and you've mentioned it a couple times, is ground resistance testing. What makes ground resistance testing stand out from something, say, something different from, say, like relay testing or doing TTR testing or something like that? Why ground resistance?
So I kind of think it's the black sheep of electrical testing. And it's way over. It's been made way too complex, because it is at its base level, resistance testing, which is something that the listeners of this podcast are just going to be very, very intimate with. And I would say, generally speaking, it's fairly well understood among this group. But the core differences, and I'll just kind of keep it to two here. One, first off, we tend to get really stressed over accuracy in this kind of testing.
Absolutely.
And it's not to say that it should be inaccurate, but you have to reframe the concept of accuracy in testing for ground resistance specifically. So, the kind of one of the fathers of this type of testing, which is fairly new overall. We're looking at somewhere in the 30s of its kind of invention or creation, and then in the 60s more perfecting of it. But in the 60s, there was a lot of research being done on ground resistance testing and understand best placement and all that kind of stuff, just understanding the concept overall. And a fellow of the name G.F. Tagg, who was an engineer in the UK, was working on ground resistance testing methods for very large ground mats. And one thing mentioned in one of his papers on the subject was we shouldn't really be concerned with inaccuracies in the range of 5 to 10% because the earth is so dynamic.
Absolutely.
The ground is so dynamic. So when we look at a measurement today and we go out and remeasure it in 3 weeks, well, atmospheric conditions have changed. The ground itself, the constituents of the ground haven't changed terribly much. But there's been outside changes to the measurement, or they're rather going to influence the measurement, I should say. So we don't have to get too stressed, I guess, about getting super accurate like we do with other test methods are significantly more accurate overall than ground resistance testing, at least in the electrical space. They're going to be more. So don't get too hung up on the decimals, I guess is what I would say there.
Now,
because they're going to change.
Well, to your point, what are some of the influences that can make those changes over a time period? Would moisture, like rain,
of course,
atmospherics, all that stuff kind of comes into play for that?
Yeah, of course. So the obvious ones are obviously rainfall, moisture content, and electrolyte content have a dramatic effect because they obviously lower resistance values of the material that they're in. So the second bigger point here is that we have to consider that we are not testing an electrical connection specifically. We're not testing a material that we consider to be conductive. Right? The Earth has more semiconductive properties than it does conductive properties, and so that kind of gets back to those resistivity values being fairly dynamic overall, up to somewhere around 100%. It can be greater in other areas, of course, but on average, you see about 100% variance in ground resistance due to atmospheric conditions over the course of a year. So big changes there. Moisture. There's some more nuanced ones here for soil, like porosity.
I was about to say,
is interesting. So the amount of air. If you go up, I've had the opportunity to test the ground, which is a strange thing to say, and in a lot of different places now. Absolutely. So I've been up to the Pacific Northwest, and when you're walking on the ground there, it kind of feels like you're walking on a wet sponge in some of their deeper soils. And so, there's a lot of air there. So that's not something we think about very much because, again, coming at it from an electrical test perspective, the Earth is just so very different. But what I really want to drive home is that while the material is different, obviously, the testing procedure is largely incredibly similar to other test methods out there in many respects too. So just because we are testing something that is, for all intents and purposes, not a conductor, doesn't mean that the test procedure changes all that much. So you have all these bigger differences, right, which make ground resistance testing so different. But at the same point in time, the application of the test itself is not really all that unique overall.
Now, what are the guiding, like, is it an IEEE is the guide? Like, I know, so I just had a conversation. The only reason I'm asking is because Tom Sandry is very well versed in the IEEE, I believe, there's multiple sections that we quoted.
Yeah.
But we covered partial discharge of shielded cables and kind of, and whenever you mentioned like the porosity of the ground, one of the things was that they had gone out to do some troubleshooting on is the way that, so they had laid some ground cable and it was covered, and it was basically the fill material that they used wasn't to spec, and that ultimately caused internal heating in the cables based on that, you know, with the dielectric and spacing around there, and ended up ultimately causing treeing and then blowing out, you know, and it was a frequent problem, but it wasn't just isolated to one area, so it took them a really long time to kind of come to play, to your point about the soil and stuff. And ultimately, it took somebody to walk out there and kind of dig it up and see what was being used as the fill material, and that was ultimately the contributor to what the issue was with the cable. So it wasn't manufacturer, wasn't anything. It was literally to that level of granularity with fill material. So
right, you know. So but, that's good. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, but is it IEEE that's kind of like the guiding document for that?
So yeah, I mean, generally that's where we see the most of, you know, I say that we always look at standards, rules, specs, or codes. That's what we sell instruments based on, because you're not just buying this to park in your garage and look at it. You know, so but to your point, yes, IEEE 81 and 80, you know, but those are largely they're largely leaning on towards substation ground mats in particular. So, but they're broad-based. I'll say this: they're very broad-based documents on how to perform those procedures, and why we should perform those procedures. So, you know, 143 is a green book. It's been superseded by a 3000 series now, but still very, very relevant. I believe that has been completely superseded. I could be wrong on that. I don't want to. Please don't make any comments about, you know, oh, that's only partially superseded. It's conditional. It's, you know, Right, so, you know, take that with a grain of salt. 143 is still a fantastic resource, though, and but that is, you know, on grounding and bonding for electronic equipments, I think is the term they use, which is kind of my favorite. You know, it doesn't get too much into the testing, but it gets into the equipments with an S.
Right.
So, you know, it's more the process of doing the grounding itself, or what needs to be installed, what resistance values. That's where the resistance value spec comes from the NETA AEMC standards.
Gotcha.
It's coming from 143, I believe, at least. It's 5 ohms and IEEE as well. You know, but 80 and 81 focus on your substations and actual testing procedures, specifically 81 there. But I'll highlight, there are some really good documents out there, mainly from the military, on grounding and bonding specifically, and then the testing application itself. So the military 419A is a really, really fantastic reference for grounding and bonding testing procedures, as well as just the installation of grounding and bonding, mainly for lightning protection systems, I believe is what they're leaning on mostly, but it is a generic document none the same, and it's used as the resource to build many other standards out there as well. So I think it's interesting stuff.
No, it definitely is, and that's kind of your wheelhouse over there. That's right. One of the primary topics you teach too, correct?
Yes, our understanding ground resistance testing seminar is by far our most popular, for sure. That's what we're known for. AEMC is known for, you know, ground resistance testing instruments. We are the worldwide leader in the manufacturing of those, and for good reasons. Ours are very, very well done. You know, one thing I'll mention too, as part of that subject, is, you know, you're electrical testing professionals, right? You're not geologists, frankly.
Right.
But the neat thing about really getting into the engineering or just the understanding of any subjects is oftentimes it brings other ones to the periphery, right? So, with your conversation with Tom and looking at backfill material, with ground resistance testing here specifically, knowing some of the electrical qualities of the soil can be very, very helpful in explaining the test procedures. Like we need a certain volume of soil to dissipate a charge. So having kind of a base understanding of how that applies and why it applies can be pretty helpful to understanding the measurement procedures and the process of what it is that you're doing. So, you do have to kind of put that scientist hat on and learn a little bit about the soil and the dirt and its conductivity and that sort of thing. So I think it's interesting. I know that it's probably not the most interesting to many.
Some are probably looking at us right now, Greg, and like, what the hell are these guys talking about with ground resistance?
So you want me to go learn about the dirt? Is that what you want? Yeah. Yes, I do. I would like for you to go do that. But you don't have to get into the exact, you don't need to know the mid, max, and average resistivity of sandy loam. But understanding that, like, hey, those soils mean something in this measurement. Right. So I think that's it's true for most industries or people that are in the somewhat expert ranges. They have to touch other subjects around what they're doing.
Well, and then again, it's kind of all encompassing and having a curiosity. Like, why not go and it'll help you identify some of the minutiae that comes with doing those specific tests and kind of give you a little bit more background on the why you get there. So definitely important.
Yeah.
Now, so this is one I've been waiting to ask for a while. So we obviously got to hang out at PowerTest a little bit, and I was walking around with Tom Wire there, and he was so dead set on showing everybody his multimeter tricks that we released in our multimeter video recently.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, and I'm holding this to a challenge here, you mentioned having some tips and tricks around megohmmeters that you could share. So I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
Share us some megohmmeter tips and tricks that we may or may not have heard of.
Yeah, so this one's not as complex, frankly. It's hard to outshine someone who is the measurement wizard, I think is what he calls himself.
I think so.
Which I love that, yeah. If anyone wants to submit any ideas on what I can call myself in my LinkedIn tagline, I'd like to hear them, because I would also like to have an emoji and a fun
emojis are hip, man. I'm thinking about changing mine from talent wizard to talent ogre. I just really own the full spectrum. So.
Yeah, there's no dirt emoji, I think, so that's going to be pretty tough. There's no ground electrode emoji. But anyways, so this is a little bit more of a basic trick for megohmmeters. I have two megohmmeters here that I'm going to show this on, but you could use a megohmmeter and a multimeter, for instance, something that can measure voltage. And if you have a question, you can answer two questions with this. Is my megohmmeter functioning fairly well? I would not. This is obviously not calibration. Please do not think this is a calibration process. But I just want to quick check and make sure it's working correctly, because maybe it's throwing a value on there, but the measurement that you're getting, it doesn't make sense, or you're just questioning its functionality, or you need a known voltage source to check your multimeter against, at least for a DC output. So you can use your megohmmeter as an output, and then you can also measure the output of your multimeter in one test, if you will. So you can see how well these instruments are performing, or just quickly check and make sure. So I have AEMC 6529 here. This is a 1 kV megohmmeter, more on the basic end, but what I love about this thing is it's got a great price point. It's about $350.
Nice.
So for a 1 kV, it's got a 1 gigaohm range on it, or excuse me, an 11 gigaohm range.
Okay.
Which well outclasses most, but I have it in its volt setting. So I'm assuming
DC voltage is what it looked like.
Yeah, so now it's set to AC and DC. This one auto.
It does an auto function.
Auto ranges. So the next thing I'm going to do is I have our AEMC model 6526, which is a 1 kV megohmmeter, and I'm going to turn that to the 250 volt setting on the instrument. So I've selected the 250 volt output setting, insulation measurement setting on the 6526, and then I have it connected with the leads to the 6529 in its volt setting, right? So if I start my measurement, I should see, to get started here. So it's inverted, unfortunately, but I'm seeing a 25 ohm impedance over here, or resistance measurement, I should say, from the impedance of the meter, and I'm seeing the meter out say what the output is, which is 274 volts, because I've got it set to its 250 setting. So we're getting a little bit more output on this instrument. But that's within tolerance here. Right. Yeah. So I can see that I'm measuring the impedance input of the 6529, which in this case is 25 ohms. Mini multimeters are 10. But I get that measurement here. I see the voltage rather here, and I see the impedance here. Right. Yeah. So just a quick way that you can verify the functionality, again, not a calibration process. But I personally, running out with a 1 kV and going testing, first, please wait longer than 10 seconds when you're doing that kind of testing. It drives me insane. You gotta run it for just a little longer. Right. If you need help on that, our manuals have plenty of information. I don't feel like your particular audience it struggles with that at all. First off, it's written in your MTS and ATS specifically.
Right. It's actually in code. Yeah.
Yeah. Minimum of a minute, but you would not believe how many people outside of this particular industry are just running a continuity test. In fact, that's how I learned. I was taught at first, like, oh, you just run through and just touch them.
Run through as fast as you can. You don't need to wait.
You don't need to wait at all. It's just instantaneous, right? So anyways, but it allows you to value your either the output of a of a megahmmeter, which something that could come up with. I see a number, I see an output voltage on the screen, but is that truly what's being output?
Right.
And is it working correctly, essentially? Right. And then on the multimeter side, is my measurement somewhat accurate, or is this working correctly? I'm getting a strange measurement over here. I need to verify that my instrument is working correctly. Right. And of course, you could find a service outlet and just throw it on the 110 there, or a known voltage source as well too could be used for that kind of test.
But like
just a quick tidbit.
Well, and on those, so like would most people carry in their toolkit 2 megameters or megohmmeters? To make a motto there, but
sure.
And so and then it comes down to like it's literally just. It's not, you're not doing it calibratable levels or for calibration purposes. Yeah, it's a function check. It's okay. Right. Is this looking like, all right, spot on, and let's go. Yep. And that's exactly what that video with Tom was kind of amplifying on, is to the point of it. This isn't to recalibrate your gear. It's literally to show, okay, I can go use this thing and I should expect reasonable results out of it based on functionality, assuming that you've done the due diligence and work to make sure that your equipment's calibrated and within periodicity and all that other good stuff.
Yeah.
So
you receive a rental unit, you receive something that a guy was using, or maybe you get a funny measurement, right? Mm-hmm. You're checking voltage and you hit something and you're like, that doesn't seem right.
Right.
There's a few ways, obviously several ways to go about just verifying that, but the big one that sticks out to me is, I'm using my megohmmeter and the values that I'm getting, my 1 kV. It's possible to do this on other units as well too. You'll just want to, 5 kV. You'll want to verify first off that whatever you are testing the voltage with is rated for that voltage.
Right.
The other thing you can do is obviously drop the voltage on it as well too. That may not test the voltage you maybe are outputting at, but at least gives you something to work off.
Another frame of reference.
Yeah, another frame of reference there. So just understand the limitations here. But just a quick verification that the voltage is being output is what the measurement on the instrument says is actually what's being output within tolerance there. So, just a quick way to verify functionality.
Yep. And one thing for me too is like whenever, and like I said, I've been far removed from being a technician of any kind for decades now, but like one of the things is when you're troubleshooting, like before I started digging apart and breaking open cabinets and doing lockout and tag out and all that other good stuff, I wanted to at least test the instrument. Now, I mean, we big budget Navy, we have like, you know, a plethora of multimeters and all sorts of test equipment, depending on whatever it is. But at least like, that's the first thing I'm checking is to make sure my equipment's functioning correctly before I go digging into anything. And I think a lot of people miss that. They consider the device to be somewhat infallible, you know, because it's been reliable for so long. But that's my one little trick I would add is like always test the test equipment first before you start breaking open or ordering parts or sending off something for micro miniature processing and, you know, or whatever it may be. So yeah, but couldn't agree with you more, man. Functional checks are imperative and beyond important.
Yep. And if you're going to, you know, live testing, NFPA 70E, for contact voltage testing, that's obviously critical. Having a proving unit, just verify that your instruments are functional, especially in a safety from a safety perspective, when doing absence of voltage testing, that shows up. But, you know, to your point, to a broader perspective is instruments do not lie, right? But they can be inaccurate. Now, many inaccuracies can be created by people, of course, right?
Human error.
You know, one thing I like to show individuals using a megohmmeter is that we want to generally be hands off when we're running the test. First off, obviously, safety could be an issue if I'm hands-on, but I can influence the measurement just by moving the leads.
I was about to say, absolutely.
By leaning up against the cabinet in which something is under test. So we want to make sure that we are truly isolating the subjects. And with insulation testing in particular, we can influence the measurement ourselves just by making simple contact. And if you don't believe that, if you're interested to see how that works, I mean, you can just shake your leads on your megohmmeter and it'll change the measurement ever so slightly, you know. But if you're recording that data, that could influence how it's recorded overall. So,
and that also goes to like shock mounted isolating, you know, isolating equipment, making sure you're not introducing any, I called it noise, but, you know, vibration, noise, anything that could kind of influence or disrupt the signal pass or whatever it may be, because some of that stuff is indeed that sensitive, you know? So, I like it. No, and solid, like I said, that's when I'd put up against Tom's stuff on that any day of the week. So good on you.
It's not as good. You know, it's not as nerdy as his stuff is, but in a good way. Tom's
my boy, man, and like I swear he probably sleeps with a multimeter and a set of amp clamps under his pillow at night. You know, so love him to death. Well, we are getting pretty close, man. We've been rocking this thing for right at an hour and 31 minutes now. And so we're getting pretty close. So thank you for hanging with me. I know it can be kind of long here, but thoroughly enjoyed it. And one of the questions that I always like to ask guests, right? So, and kind of speaking to our talk about wisdom and what you would, you know, discuss with younger self. If you could go back to young Gregg, starting in the power industry, first time, what advice would you give yourself to kind of remedy some of those situations that we addressed earlier?
So ask more questions, even if they do seem stupid. You know, I would say I would probably have gotten an earlier start, and I would have looked for alternative paths, because, you know, we think of when you're young, you get out of high school or college or whatever it is, right? And you're starting in a role, it's very broad based. You know, the electrical industry by and large is associated with electricians wiring new stuff, right? You know, pulling wire, terminating, that sort of thing. But
or linemen, right?
And or linemen, like And listen, critical.
Absolutely.
We can't 100%. Test it if it's not there, right? So we got to rely on those guys to do a good enough job to make the testing of everything a little bit easier, right? So, but we tend to associate electrical work with just that, you know, from a broad-based perspective. But it's so much more, and that's, I think, what's interesting about it. You know, there's controls, there's automation, there's the testing aspects of stuff, there's manufacturing, there's, you know, and then there's specialties all inside there.
Absolutely.
You know, you could just know every single thing about breakers. You know, So I would say find a specialty that you can be passionate about inside the industry or inside the broader industry, I suppose, and try to invest in it. And even if you don't stick with that one in particular, it still brings a skill set that you can apply later on. So don't be afraid to jump into a specialty or look for a specialty role or position outside of your general training once that is completed and you put your time in. Because I'd say that's something that it happened to me, but it was sort of by happenstance more than anything, and not necessarily because I was interested in it. I generally can be interested in anything, but that in that particular situation, no, not really. So, find something that you're generally somewhat interested in that'll keep your motivation level up to go to work each day. Because you enjoy what you do, because it's fun. So I would say that would be one thing, and then to always continue to look for qualifications and learning opportunities too. And I suppose that's similar to the previous thing that the previous identified kind of niche worlds to live in and gain a skill set. But yeah, look for those opportunities to be more educated, and take the small stuff, take the boring stuff real serious too, because it's probably important from a safety perspective a lot of times, because safety training is not usually the most exciting day, but it's critical. But outside of that, having a good grasp of the NEC, I like following some of these groups that post little quizzes about the NEC. That's pretty boring, man. It is, but staying up on that and being educated on rules, standards, codes, and specs can be very helpful in your future endeavors. And then the last one too is, and I think this one's critical, and we could probably do a better job as employers, as people leaders, and from an education perspective, just a formal education program, is keep working on the soft skills of everyone involved. Starting that from the ground up of learning to communicate. One of the downsides of going to a trade school is the lack of soft skills, I suppose, or even non-related skill sets. And we could do a better job education-wise of all this stuff, but how to balance a checkbook. We don't use checkbooks anymore, but that's important stuff to learn.
Life skills and soft
skills, yeah. But also those interpersonal skill sets need to be developed. We need to learn to communicate better. We need to learn to articulate ourselves better. Apparently I can't today. Those skills are critical for the success of the mission, the success of the job, the task, and working together to better our employers and ourselves, one and the same. So I think we probably don't place enough emphasis on stuff like that because we're busy, frankly, and we don't see the return on investment there. But I think there's a huge return that could be realized by not only investing it for yourself, but investing it for the people that you may be the leader for, especially. So
I think that's all sage advice, and I think you could almost summate and wrap that up to, if you want to foster a culture where people want to stay there and be loyal, and as we know, retention of people in industry, especially with as desirable as technicians are in this day, culture is now one of those things that if you're not prioritizing it, and you have to have adequate compensation included in there as well, because if the delta is too high, you're just not going to get there. But culture, training, and really investing in your employees, are you going to lose some? Yeah, you're going to eventually lose some, right? Because if you did your job right, they're either going to take your job or go start something else and do it on their own, or spread the awareness there. But all those things that you just mentioned are hyper salient to the overarching goal of building what we referred to earlier would be the culture of an organization. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. So, one thing I like, I worked for a company that had a really interesting policy on people leaving. I took this away from the organization I worked with, is that they, our CEO said, listen, people are going to leave and start their own stuff, right? And we're going to look at that as a major win. And let me tell you why. We instilled the work ethic, or at least complemented their work ethic enough for them to go out and figure this out on their own. And we gave them the skill set and the positive reinforcement to believe that they could do this. Now we just get the opportunity to do it for someone else. And it's a tough thing to buy into, frankly. But it is the right mindset, because you're kind of like begrudgingly, I invested all this, it becomes a little bit selfish, right? But if that person has, performed adequately or above for you and participated and contributed, and they're going off to do something better for themselves, or at least what they perceive to be better for themselves, then good for you for being able to grow them in an industry in which they felt like they could be successful other places at. And the same thing could be said for someone moving on to a better, maybe a better paying position, or something that they're more interested in, or that fits their family life better. We've given them the skill set to move on to do something that enhances their quality of life too. Because listen, work is important. I think that we should be passionate about what we do.
I agree.
Business, by far, this is on my LinkedIn page, like, business is one of the most personal things you will do ever. And a great mentor at a time in my life when I needed one taught me that stuff, taught me that's particular. It's like this. I don't like the comment of, it's not personal, it's business. This paying our bills is an incredibly personal thing, right? Supporting our families is an incredibly personal thing. So if you treat the decisions that you make like that, then there are no personal / business decisions. They're all one and the same, and you'll make better decisions that way, both for yourself and for the people that you lead. So, I think that's important to keep in mind when we handle situations, whether they're personnel or not. Like, being profitable is important for your employees, and I don't have to tell the business owners on this, maybe that are watching this, that, right? It's important.
Living it every day.
Yeah. So, sometimes you have to say no to opportunities because they're not profitable and not good uses of your time. And that's tough to do. That can be hard to do, but you got to do it for your people.
It stings every time. Because like I said, we've been hyper fortunate this year, and I'm just blessed from that aspect of things. But it literally pains me. I've had a couple of calls this week where people that just weren't servicing the right industry, or I didn't necessarily align with their purview on some stuff. You have to figure out what's best for your culture, your organization, your people, and doing those things, even if it is at the cost of opportunity cost. So couldn't agree with you more on that.
Not all money is good money.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a tough pill to swallow when you're a new business, especially, or a small business in general too. I don't want to take that away. So not all money is good money, but when you make those decisions, you make them for the betterment of your company, but also your personal, the personnel, the people that work with you. So, I think that's probably a driving force in how I try to operate overall, whether it be business related or personal related too, is like, this affects more than me. These decisions oftentimes affect more than me. So, that's a whole nother. I think we just ranted a lot today.
Dude, I'm okay with it. Like I said, that's why we have a generalized framework, and then people may find it good. If not, that's okay too. Like I said, we're not here to serve everybody. It's one of those things. It serves a purpose, and I think I honestly think a lot of people get a lot out of it, and hopefully have learned a little bit more about always eating. What was the M for? More. Always eating more cake, or AEMC. So, but no, man, really, really good conversation. I know you don't mind sharing. I've seen you doing it in person, and that's part of your role and responsibility. Where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, so my email is gwong@aemc.com. You can go to our website. You can call our office, aemc.com. Call the AEMC Instruments phone number as well too. You can find that on the website, and they'll get you in touch with me.
Awesome.
LinkedIn's also a pretty decent resource.
Are you on there a pretty good amount? Like I live there, obviously as part of the gig here, but
sure.
So you're on there a pretty good amount.
I try to make a couple posts a month.
Okay.
Whether they be new products or otherwise. So
sweet. Well, awesome, brother. Well, thank you again. I think it was highly beneficial. Yep, we got some rants in there, and like I said, I keep it very informal for that reason, because it gives a more personable aspect, right? It's just two dudes and a guy and a gal or whatever it may be having a conversation. Like that's what it's about for me. Is like spread it. So thank you so much for your freaking time, and to the rest of the audience. Until next time, Mike out. Thanks again, Greg.
Thanks.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.